Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division 2 video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the Battlegroup overview for the 3rd Guards Tank Corps. This is probably one of the strongest Soviet divisions in the game currently due to the IS-2 1944s, and the way that you play the 3rd Guards is you basically play around your IS-2s, keep these alive as long as you can in order to win the game. That's where you get your value from here. There are also some other units that can get some value, but it mainly comes down to playing around the IS-2s. We're going to be choosing a balanced deployment type. And please remember guys, if you would like to see more live gameplay of Steel Division 2, to check out my streams on Saturday and Sunday at 8 PM BST. That's at twitch.tv/VulcanHDGaming. Make sure to go follow me there. Underneath the stream there is a countdown to show you exactly how long until the next stream, so you guys can find out for yourselves and in your own time zones when that will be. So make sure to go check it out. Also, if you would like the codes to my divisions, this one and any other ones that I've covered in my Battlegroup overview so far, make sure to check the link in the description to my Battlegroup code list, which is a Google Doc where you can just copy and paste all of the codes that I make into the game and give you guys a head start. So there you go. Either way, let's jump into the 3rd Guards. So in the Recon tab, I've got all Razvedka. We've got Razvedka in A, B and C. Since we're balanced, it works out quite nicely. And the great thing about Razvedka is they're actually pretty decent squads on their own. They can fend off sort of other similar tier infantry, so things like ersatz they can defeat, just generally like lighter infantry units. They might struggle against like pioneers and also panzergrands, but everything else you can take on because they have the 7 SVT, so it gives them a little bit of firepower. Also allows them to kill off support weapons like AT guns and infantry guns if you get them close enough. Generally you'll find them by walking them through the forest and so on. The other great thing about the Razvedka is they have the very good stealth, and they're an 8-man squad. So you got a big squad that can remain quite healthy whilst also using its bazooka to ambush enemy armor nearby, and you get quite a lot of value out of the Razvedka by doing so. In terms of actually using them for recon, they can be great in heavy forest for spotting the reinforcements. That's what I would use recon for in general in Steel Division 2. Recon's great for spotting what's coming, not necessarily what's right in front of you, because generally recon will struggle to spot things in heavy cover, like in towns or in heavy forest, when you're walking towards it, because the actual discovery range is very short, like I think it's 400 or even 200 meters for a very high optic. So unless that unit is firing, you won't spot it that quickly at all. But they are useful to have near your other units so you can spot AT guns sooner when they start firing. Other choices in the Recon tab, we have the motorcycle. This doesn't have a radio, so I would never really recommend it. The docile squads can be quite nice if you want infantry that can remain hidden for most of the game. They've got exceptional stealth because they are a 2-man squad. I think the Razvedka also have exceptional stealth, but they cost more and they basically do the same thing. So I would stick to the docile squads if you want some hidden recon. They can do that great. They can also come in with the BA-64B recon car. They can also bring in the M3A1 Razvedka recon car as well. Both of those are decent choices for harassing enemy infantry and spotting enemies as well. Then there's the BA-10M. This can be a great weapon for attacking infantry. It has 2 machine guns and HE shells, so it can pin down infantry quite quickly, and you know, it can do a lot of damage. But because you can't actually, you know, run down the infantry itself, lethality is kind of more important when it comes to infantry recon or anti-infantry recon. So that's why the 259 on the Axis side is really good with its 20mm autocannon, because it provides lethality as opposed to just suppression. Because recon vehicles can't take advantage of suppression because they can't make units surrender. So the BA-10M, good fire support, but not quite making the cut in this division. Then finally there is the Valentine 3. This is great for picking off light armored vehicles, but since you have Shermans in this division, it kind of doesn't have a place in the recon tab, and it's not great for killing infantry either, so there's that. Moving on to the infantry tab, we start off with the GV Conroti. These are plentiful infantry command squads in Phase A. You get 4 of them. They have SVTs and smoke grenades. Smoke grenades is the main thing, I always mention it, but it gives you a lot of flexibility as to how you use them. So you can use them to, you know, save your AT guns, your support weapons. You can also throw them in front of your tanks if they get like track broken or something like that, allowing you to get supply up to fix them and so on. And it's very important for things like IS-2s because you're going to want to keep them alive. So in some cases I would go as far to just have an infantry leader follow an IS-2. You can follow units if you left click on a unit and then right click on the unit you want it to follow. It will just run after it and follow it everywhere it goes. So with an infantry squad behind slow tanks, it can work very well, especially for infantry command, because infantry command is harder to spot, of course, than a tank command unit. Then we have a card of the Gvardia in Phase A. These are the ones with the 2 machine guns and the PTRD. Really solid squad for Phase A, can take on most infantry at range. Really, that's where you want to use them at close range. They do struggle where they only have 1 submachine gun. If you want close range engagements, I'm relying in this division on the Avtama Cheekies. These guys, they have 10 submachine guns, very, very strong squads, and I'm also using the M2A1 half track. This half track can allow these guys to get to where they need to be, because if you are in a normal transport like a Studbecker, if you get fired at, then they're going to take suppression, they're going to automatically unload. Whereas if you're in a half-track vehicle like this, which is armed, they won't automatically unload unless the unit gets fully pinned. So you can get away with maybe taking a bit of damage on your half-track and then actually unloading these infantry exactly where you want them in a tree line. So that's what these are fantastic for. The close range engagement in the early game is what they're trying to sort out for us. And in Phase B, we have the Saperi. This is another close-range infantry squad. These can do some damage at range due to the 7 SVTs and the machine gun, but the main use of them is their HE grenade here, the TNT. That can obviously pin down squads very quickly and just do a lot of damage in the process as well. So even if you aren't surrendering the unit because maybe they have a leader nearby, you are still doing a lot of damage with these Saperi. And in the mid-game, where you have the least amount of income during the game, these are all I have in the division. So just 1 card of infantry in Phase B, but they do have the half-tracks to back them up. Same reason as we have them in the have the Avtos there with the M2A1s as well. In Phase C, we have the Gvardia. These are the standard Gvardia. You can actually get 27 of them on a card in Phase C. And that's why I'm bringing in these Gvardia as opposed to the Gvardia with the DPs. Also, you can only get 1 card of the Gvardia with the DP in the 3rd Guard tank course. So you're kind of forced to bring these if you want some sort of longer range fire support units, but they are more or less just chaff to take fire for your large units like IS-2s. So you would hew and wave these in front of your IS-2s in order to make ground, and then the IS-2s can find the valuable kills. I've also got a card of Sapari to help you basically deal with the closer range infantry in forests and towns in the late game to allow your IS-2s to have a little bit more flexibility and make sure they're not getting flanked. Other choices in the infantry tab, we do have the Sapari. These can be a decent choice now. You can actually get 9 of them in Phase A at this point, so can be great for contesting positions early on. Just bear in mind that the infantry tab doesn't have many slots and they're quite expensive as well. So finding a place to put these, I guess you could potentially replace the Avtos with them, but the Avtos have so much more value in my opinion than the 4-man Sapari squads. Then there's the Tanko Desaniki. You can get 9 of these in Phase A as well. If I had enough M2A1 half-tracks, then I would bring 9 in Phase A, but you don't, so I've only got the M2A1 half-tracks here carrying the Avtos. And that's I would say the reason that I'm bringing Avtos instead of Tankos, because the Tankos, I do actually really like them due to their smoke grenades. If Avtos had smoke grenades, they would be ridiculously good. So yeah, I would prefer to have Tankos instead of Avtos. You can see that they're actually 10 points cheaper, and they still have really decent damage against infantry. But just due to the M2A1 half-track shortage, it's not really worth it in my opinion. There's a couple more squads of Gvardi if you want them. There's the Avto Komroti, which could be a choice instead of the GV Komroti, but you can only get 2 of them in Phase A because you have to bring them at 2-star veterancy. So that's the reason I'm not bringing these as compared to the GV. I would prefer to bring these because they use submachine guns and therefore they are less liable to reveal themselves at range, but due to the availability, not worth it. Then we have the Tanker Komroti. These guys have an anti-tank grenade, and there's a Peli Komroti which have a Panzerfaust. You can take those if you prefer them. That's up to you guys. Moving on to the tank tab. This is where the fun is with the 3rd Guards Tank Corps. We have a bunch of Lend-Lease Shermans, and then they're supported by the IS-2s. So I have a bit of an unconventional 3rd Guards Tank Corps build here. Generally, people would bring an IS-2 in Phase A to give them significant power against things like Tigers and Panthers that could arrive in something like a 5th Panzer Division, because that's quite a common matchup for a 3rd Guards Tank Corps. People will bring something like a 5th Panzer or a 14th Infantry or maybe 21st Panzer. So having an IS-2 in Phase A is very useful, but in this case I'm playing this as much more of a brawling division in Phase A and then transitioning into the heavy armor in Phase B and C. So the way that I'm doing that is bringing 2 cards of the Shermans in Phase A with the Commander Sherman as well to accompany them. Then in Phase B we've got another card of Shermans with IS-2 Komroti and the IS-2 1944s. The intention here with this specific division is to buy all of these IS-2s in Phase B. So that's a lot of points. You only got 1,400 points to work with in total in Phase B. So if you can get away with it at the end of Phase A, save up a few points and then bring in as many IS-2s as you can, as quickly as you can, create a group of IS-2s that can support each other and then play around that to make ground. It's an incredibly strong way of playing with a 3rd Guards Tank Corps in my opinion, rather than relying on the single one in Phase A. That's what I'm going for here. Then in Phase C, more Shermans and IS-2s. Let's have a quick look at their stats and talk about what these do. So the Shermans, they are good for dealing with Panzer IVs in the early game. They will struggle to deal with things like Tigers and Panthers. However, you can potentially go for side shots. You will have more Shermans than they have Tigers and Panthers in the early game. So you can try and swarm units if you are in a closer range setting. The other thing is to bear in mind, the way that I built this division, it comes down to the way that IS-2s used to be. They have since had their accuracy increased, but they used to have pretty low accuracy. So I used to play the 3rd Guards Tank Corps as a very sort of medium to close range division where you use the IS-2s as brawlers alongside the Shermans. It's a little bit different now, which is why there's sort of a transition to the heavy tank playstyle at longer range. But yeah, the Shermans, they're great brawling tanks. Close range engagements are king with these guys because they have the 30 degrees per second traverse speed on their gun, or on their turret I guess, and then their guns got 90mm penetration, which is decent for dealing with medium armor in the early game. Furthermore, they also have plenty of machine guns. They got a 50 cal, 230 cals, and they have HE on their main gun, so they're decent for dealing with infantry. And that's really where they can come in handy, especially taking down support weapons very quickly. They can pin down AT guns very quickly, especially at close range. You can probably pin down an AT gun before it can fire at you if you spot it first at close range, which is quite something with a tank. It's not many tanks that can actually do that. In terms of IS-2s, the IS-2 Komroti is actually an IS-2 1943. You can see the comparison here with the 1944 variant. The 1944 variant, it gets better front and side armor, and also has a slightly better gun, the D25T, which has 5% better accuracy. So that's the main differences between the two. You can see them there. These orange numbers, by the way, that indicates the effective veterancy, just so you are aware. So yeah, the IS-2 1944s, they have become much better at longer range engagements due to their accuracy buff, and now if you provide leaders with them, plus commander bonuses, they're pushing near 60% accuracy at max range, which is pretty damn good for a gun that has 200mm of penetration. So you can do a lot of damage with these. Also, the HE shells have a lot of damage on them. If I can select them, that is. Can't quite show you guys, but they have a lot of damage, a lot of HE damage against units like AT guns, against infantry and so on. They've also got plenty of machine guns, of course, so a Dushka on the top and two frontal mounted DPs. Actually, I think one's in the back of the turret. Is that one actually there? I don't even know. Either way, they got two machine guns, 3 machine guns in total, so they're pretty good at dealing with infantry. And that's the tank tab. Moving on to support, you can see that this one's a pretty barren part of the 3rd Guards Tank Corps. I've got some Ogdemachiki in Phase A. I'm actually bringing them currently in the M2 half-tracks, but I would probably recommend instead bringing them in with the Jeeps here. The Jeeps that have the 105 km/h speed. Main reason being is the main reason you bring in flamers in Phase A is so that they can lock down positions further up earlier on. So you'd bring them in more or less at the start of the game and contest flags that are on the 50-50 with the flamers. Same reason you'd bring in the Sapari in the infantry tab. And using these plus the flamers can be a really good combination, so do consider it. But either way, in the support tab here, bringing them with the Jeeps is very nice. And they can do some damage to infantry squads. The best way to use them is to have them in buildings or heavy cover and let the enemy run towards you and then kill or hit the infantry when they're in the open. And then the infantry in the open won't be able to sit still and fire, therefore they'll take more damage because they're on the move, and they'll also be less accurate at firing back, which means the 2-strength squad will actually survive longer and also deal more damage. That's the best way to use them. They also have plenty of smoke, so use that to keep them alive as well. You can also use this to help out other units nearby. Then I have one commander in this division. It's something that I've been considering to change, maybe add another commander, just because it's a pretty weak commander. It's a motorcycle, and it's probably the worst unit in the game. Like, I would rather this be infantry than a motorcycle, because motorcycles are vulnerable to light arms fire, and they can also be easily targeted by AP weapons like AT guns. Whereas, at least with an infantry unit, you can only get hit by HE as opposed to the AP weapons like AT guns. So there's way more things that threaten a motorcycle than threaten an infantry squad, because a motorcycle's basically got the worst of both worlds. So I consider maybe changing that to the M2 combat in Phase B, so that you have a better armored vehicle to work with that's not so vulnerable to artillery fire and so on. And also maybe just adding that on top if you can find the 2 points elsewhere. Then in Phase B I have the supply. This is to resupply my Su-76s that I have in the artillery tab, but we'll get to those later on. Other choices in the support tab is the Maxim and the SG-43. Machine guns at the moment are pretty damn lackluster on the Soviet side. They just don't really have that much effectiveness. They don't really kill units all that easily. So I would stay away from the Maxim and the SG-43s for now. OB-25s, very, very good unit, but just don't have the space in my division for them. I could consider maybe taking out the flamers for these instead in Phase A, bringing in 6 at no veterancy, would be the ideal way. Make sure you change, of course, the transport to a jeep or something instead so they can get to position quickly. But yeah, these are fantastic because they have heat shells, and these heat shells, if you keep them reloaded by having a supply vehicle nearby, can be really effective. 90mm of penetration. They don't suffer from losing penetration at range because it's a heat shell. And they also have, of course, the HE shells, which have 2 damage, so they're very strong against infantry as well. Can help you pin them down at a distance and do plenty of damage in the process. That's pretty much a lot for the support tab. Into the anti-tank tab, another lackluster tab here for this division. We've got a card of Panzerschrecks in Phase A, a card of the 45mm AT guns in Phase A and in Phase B. So in Phase A, the Panzerschrecks, these can accompany the Flamer squads in pushing up and contesting objectives early on, or you can just ride them out at the beginning into kind of really obscure positions that you might think an infantry, or not an infantry squad, a enemy vehicle will go near. One thing I find really useful with Panzerschrecks is they're great for covering your flanks. So especially where your IS-2s in this division will be very concentrated in one area, that's the best way to use them in my opinion. The Panzerschrecks can be useful for covering your flanks and stopping fast salients where you aren't necessarily holding your heavy armor. So that's a good use for the Panzerschrecks. These AT guns, these 35-point AT guns, I really like them. They're great for side shots. You use them as ambushing units. You don't want to let them fire at long range. Always use the efficient shot option. In the bottom right, there'll be the efficient shot option there. I'm not entirely sure what the hotkey is for it. But yeah, definitely make sure you use efficient shot, and also return fire is another way you can use these. And just put them in, I guess not necessarily obscure positions, but positions where if a tank reveals itself, you will be firing at their side armor. So if they're driving forwards towards your line, you're on the left or right of it. And that is how you get the most efficiency out of these AT guns. And because they only cost 35 points, most of the time if they score one tank kill, they have paid themselves off. And that's what you want to look for in most units in Steel Division 2. Other choices in the anti-tank tab include the PTRS-41. Unfortunately, AT squads or AT rifle squads, the 2-man variants aren't all that great unless you just have extra activation points to work with, which often you don't. Then there's the ZIS-3. I'm just not a big fan of these. They really lack the stealth that the 45mm guns have, and also the optics is different. As you can see, the F45mm, they have good optics. The ZIS-3s have normal optics. So the ZIS-3s have to be babysat by recon, and they're also just generally less cost efficient. They can indirect fire, but you only get 13 HE shells, and those 13 HE shells really aren't that great unless they direct hit. So you'd only ever be using those HE shells really as direct fire shells. And I guess if you got it in the right position and it didn't come under too much fire, you could maybe use it as an infantry support gun, but it's very pricey for that role. Then finally, you have the Su-85s. These, unfortunately, are pretty lackluster at the moment due to their lack of rate of fire. 5 round per minute rate of fire is really not all that great, especially considering they have a lack of armor. I talked about this before. T-34-85s, they have the same rate of fire. The thing that makes a T-34-85 okay is that it has decent armor, so it can survive a shot if it's shot back at. Whereas this will fire a shot, not reload before it gets shot at, and then die. And that's generally what happens, especially against the targets that you would want to use it again, like a Panther, like a Tiger. That's what the Su-85s are there to kill, but they will often get killed by them because they can't fire fast enough. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention about the ZIS-3 is they have a really terrible availability compared to the 45mm. Now, of course, the effectiveness is a lot worse, or a lot better in terms of overall penetration, but use the 45mm right, and they'll do you proud. Right, moving on to the anti-air tab. There isn't really much to look at here. We've just got the 37mm AA with the Dushka trucks in Phase A and Phase B. You can get 2 and 4 on a card if you have no veterancy. These are just really good enough. If you just have a couple of them or a few of them, you will have more or less all of the AA you need for a game most of the time, especially in a 1v1. So that's what's so good again about the 37mm. They're pretty accurate. They can do a lot of damage very quickly. The other good unit here is the M15, the ZSU M15. These can be pretty good because they also have a 37mm HE gun in between the 250 cals. So that's what makes them useful in the same capacity as a standard 37mm. You could probably bring in these in Phase B instead of the other 37mm, but I like to have the extra availability just in case these are getting artied or something in a team game. So the way that I built this is kind of to supplement for a team game as opposed to 1v1. But in 1v1, you can probably get away with bringing in the M15s in Phase B instead. Now the other options that you have, there's the Maxim 4Ms, just really lackluster at the moment. Not really very useful. Maybe in numbers they can work effectively, but for the amount you would need to do the same damage as a 37mm, yeah, it's not worth it. Just really not worth it. There is a lot of cards of these 85mm guns. You've got 4 cards of them. But although they are pretty effective, if you have, say, 3 or 4 of them, you can stop most strikes before they drop their payloads. So if an aircraft's coming in with bombs, most of the time you can make it fall back before it will drop those bombs, whereas 37mm won't do that. They'll just more likely shoot down the aircraft after they've done so. But it's very unlikely for an 85mm to ever shoot down an aircraft. Generally they're okay at pinning the aircraft, but not necessarily at finding the kills. So these are more preventative, these are more lethal. And that's the way I would look at it. So that's if you're going to use them for AA. There is, of course, the opportunity to use these for anti-tank, but you'd have to use them how I explained using the 88s the other day, which is you want them near the edge of trees, heavy trees like heavy forest, and just sort of wheel them around the edge, take your shots, and then fall back. That's the way you want to use them, and preferably with veterancy, because you can see like the AP shells here, they have 55% accuracy. If you add the 2-star veterancy on top of that, you get an extra 13%, which puts you up to 68% accuracy, which is pretty damn good. And you also increase the rate of fire to 20 rounds per minute, which is pretty nuts. So these can be incredibly effective with veterancy, but finding a space for them in the anti-air tab when you need all of the anti-air you can get to support your IS-2s is really hard to do in this division. Moving on to the artillery tab. Artillery tab's relatively lackluster as well, but in Phase 8, just got some 120mm mortars. Good for pinning down units. They've got really good blast and suppression. And they also have the smoke grenades or smoke shells that are good for covering your tanks and infantry throughout the game. So that's what they're there for. Unfortunately, you'd have to wait till Phase B to get supply for them. So use the HE and smoke sparingly in Phase A, but definitely worth bringing for sure. And in Phase B, I have some VZ-VOD UPR. These are the leader squads. They also provide radios. And in this division, I do have an abundance of Su-76s, and these can use radios very well. Generally, you'd want to use their own radios more than anything, but if you want to snipe specific units, having radios from these command units is pretty important. Also, you may notice that there isn't really much room for infantry leaders in this division, so getting some in the artillery tab is necessary to supply you with enough to through the mid to late game. Right, on to the Su-76s. We've got a card in Phase B and a card in Phase C. The main use of these is to pin down units like Tigers, Panthers, and King Tigers. So these can indirect fire, but the great thing about an Su-76 is they have radios, and they can use their own radio for corrected shot. On top of that, the Su-76M can track a target indirectly, which is not something most artillery units can do. So if they are within your range of 2,000 meters and they are within your radio range, if you just right click on the unit, the Su-76 will just indirect fire directly at the unit and track the unit whilst it's moving. So that's really, really effective for just constantly hitting things like Tigers, Panthers, King Tigers, and doing HE damage that might eventually kill that target, but also, of course, is providing suppression, which will then allow you to find a much easier kill with something like an IS-2, or even a Sherman for that matter. These can be really good support for Shermans. So use them indirect fire, keep them behind cover, hills, trees, etc. Use their indirect fire ability within 2,000 meter range to really punish your enemy for getting too close. And again, it comes down to the brawling style. These really, really supplement it very, very well. And moving into B and C, you got plenty of them. I just bring in as many as I can in Phase B, generally just because I can. That amount of availability, you're probably not going to buy them all in Phase B, but at least you have the choice there to bring them if you need them. The other choices in the artillery tab, artillerists are just not quite up to scratch at the moment compared to the VZ-VOD. We've got the F-22, which can be decent as like an indirect and even direct support weapon, but its AP shells are not fantastic. They only have 30% accuracy, and the HE shells are lackluster as well. So just an all-round lackluster unit, and you could basically get a ZIS-3, which is just better in the anti-tank tab, if you wanted to play with a unit like that, for example. There is 82mm mortars. Definitely a preference thing between these and the 120mm. Some people bring both. But you can get quite a lot of them in Phase A. Well, 4 on a card. I think that's the main reason that I bring the 120mm, because you only sacrifice one availability and you just get a mortar that's way more powerful. So 82mm mortars, good thing about them is they fire very quickly. They have a good rate of fire. They can get down a smoke wall very, very quickly. So use them for that kind of thing if you're going to bring them. Same deal with the motorcycles. The motorcycles, the good thing about the motorcycles is you can move them very quickly after they fire, so they are much harder to counter battery, but they will die very quickly if they do get counter batteried. So you have to be on point with your micro. Every time you order these to give a strike, make sure you also hold shift and give them a move order so that they move after they've fired. Very important. You can also get a couple more cards of the 120mm mortars if you want. Finally, the air tab of the 3rd Guards Tank Corps. It's quite a lot to choose from here, but I keep it relatively simple. Similar to my 5th Panzer Division, I mainly use my Air Force to just cover the skies against enemy attacking aircraft, either fighter bombers or bombers. So I've just got the P-2Rs in Phase A as recon. This is a really useful aircraft just to see what's going on early on. Especially considering you won't have an IS-2 to play with in the early game, it's pretty important that you know where your enemy's heavy assets are, and a recon aircraft is great at spotting them very quickly in the early game. It's also a relatively fast aircraft, and it has a decent amount of resilience, so if it comes under fire, it can generally get away. In other cards, the Yak-7Bs in Phase A and Phase B. We have 2 in Phase A and 4 in Phase B. These are very good fighters. They have 580 km/h speed. They also have the 20mm and the 2 12.7mm machine guns with really good accuracy. So great dogfighting aircraft, just for helping covering the skies. I wouldn't recommend using them for strafing anymore due to strafing being less accurate. And also their limited ammo count does make it very risky to strafe, because if you've strafed an aircraft and then an enemy fighter comes in, you might not have enough ammunition to shoot down the enemy aircraft and you'll be left in a bit of a pickle. So yeah, bear that in mind. Just use them for air superiority solely in order to help keep your IS-2s safe. So other choices in this division, there is the PE-283. These are ground attack aircraft, not very good though. They are pretty damn awful, honestly. They have a limited amount of machine guns on the front for that purpose, so I would recommend staying away from these. They're more really heavy fighters than anything. They don't really fill the ground attack role very well at all. So bear that in mind. They're pretty bad. IL-2M, they have 4 100 kilogram bombs. These can be okay. They do have cannons on the wings to help you strafe, but I just don't find that they're worth their price for what they bring. Also, they're pretty exposed for a long time due to the 320 km/h speed, so a lackluster IL-2. Generally, if you're going to bring IL-2s, make sure they come with better payloads, things like AT rockets, or just better bombs in general. There is the IL-2M with the napalm bombs. This napalm bomber, very ineffective at the moment. The napalm bombs don't really do their job all that well. Unless a unit is sitting directly on top of the flames, it's not going to take damage or suppression. So, because the bombs make such small bits of fire on the ground, it's generally really ineffective. Then there's the Yak-7B. This comes with HE rockets. HE rockets just generally pretty lackluster at the moment, especially the 82mm version. The bigger HE rockets can do some decent damage, but these ones I would recommend staying away from. It does maintain its good speed, so you could potentially supplement these for some fighters, but you will notice that they do suffer from a lack of agility in comparison to the fighter variant, so they won't be able to turn fight and dogfight as well as the Yak-7B, so bear that in mind. The PE-283 with rockets, these are 132 rockets, 132mm rockets, sorry. These definitely have a much better chance at pinning things down than the Yak-7B with rockets, but just aren't really space for them in the division. They have low availability, they're quite costly, and for the payload that they have, the price is just like crazy high, so wouldn't really recommend them. I would say if you're going to bring anything in this division in terms of bombers, it would be these PE-2s. These PE-283s with the 4 250 kilogram bombs. The main reason being, these bombs actually do damage. They can pin down any unit they hit. So Tigers, Panthers, AT guns they can kill in one pass, that kind of thing. So that's what they're used for. That's what makes them really good. And in comparison to the rest of the units, and you're only paying 5 points more for a payload that's going to do twice as much damage as the rockets. These are slower, 320 km/h speed, so you are going to want to escort them with fighters if you bring them in, or just make sure you have adequate AA. But there you go. That's the air tab. In terms of defense, pretty simple stuff. Generally, you would use this as an attacking division in Breakthrough, not necessarily a defensive one. And there's your lot. That's the 3rd Guards Tank Corps. So make sure you do play around those IS-2 1944s. I pointed out just how good they are. They have really good accuracy now. And with veterancy, can snipe things at a distance with that 200mm of penetration. It can be pretty damn scary. Make sure you support them with the Su-76Ms to make those engagements even easier. The Yak-7Bs to cover the skies. You've got all of the AA you need to help that out as well. In the early game, it's all about the brawling, using the AT guns, the 45mm at close range, the Shermans at close range, Abtos at close range, and so on. And then moving into the later game, use the Gavardia to reveal things at range. You use the Sapari to secure your flanks at heavy cover and all that kind of stuff. And you've got your Resvedka to make sure you're seeing what's going on and ambushing throughout the game. So there you go. That pretty much sums it up. So hopefully you guys have found that helpful. Again, make sure to check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/VulcanHDGaming if you'd like to catch live gameplay of Steel Division 2 and maybe join in some games. I appreciate if you guys come along. Also, if you need the codes, make sure to check the link in the description to get all of the Battlegroup codes for all of my divisions if you'd like a little leg up in the Steel Division 2. But that's it. Make sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. That's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.